When I created my first video essay over a year ago, I stated that the aliens in Contact weren't real. They were symbols, representations of the main character's inner journey to open her heart to the world. I could make a very similar video about M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, in which the aliens are little more than objects of adversity to encourage the main character to regain his faith. This idea works for a lot of horror films. Aliens, slasher villains, and even kaiju are often more than they appear. When a monster of a film is truly successful, it doesn't just create something scary or memorable. It creates an icon, something that worms its way deep into the pop culture's collective mind, encouraging them to dissect its layers and imbue it with their own interpretations and perspectives. To create a truly iconic monster, one must think beyond the simple contrivances of plot, design, and motive. The best monsters are never simple, and their horror never works alone. Picking apart the alien from Ridley Scott's 1979 classic Alien is easy. The most famous art of H.R. Giger is well known for its hellish blending of humanoid forms with mechanical shapes. In the art of Giger, life, death, machinery, and sex are interchangeable and often indistinguishable. The alien, whose design was lifted right from the pages of Giger's Necronomicon, is the pure embodiment of these themes. Inhuman flesh and muscle are warped into metallic pipes and tubes, and the curvy, phallic head carries an instrument of penetrative death. The xenomorph is not just some monster let loose upon a defenseless crew of space truckers. It is the threat of assault. It is forced impregnation and a sexual stalker who voyeuristically lets the hero strip while it hides and washes. These themes shifted when James Cameron took over for the sequel. When you watch the director's cut, a previously deleted scene reveals that during her long sleep between films, Ripley's daughter has grown up and died of old age without her. So, on top of already being a monster that took her whole crew from her, the xenomorphs as a species have now essentially robbed her of her own daughter. The inclusion of this scene adds new layers to her bonding with Newt as a surrogate daughter. It also means that her conflict with the xenomorph queen does not simply end with the destruction of a powerful enemy, but is Ripley reclaiming the life that was taken from her. Putting aliens aside for the moment and returning to Earth, mostly, it's tempting to treat the villains of slasher films as little more than vehicles of violence, often seeming to act with very little motivation or reason. The easiest and most obvious way to look into them for death is to also treat them as sexual predators. After all, they're often most famous for their taste for young women.
We love premarital sex!
What's a little less obvious, but far more potent, is that slashers are often stand-ins to represent the conservative values and moral panics of their time. What's often called the golden age of slasher films coincides neatly with what's called the golden age of serial murder. This was the time of mass media coverage for killers like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, and their infamy added to the already growing moral panic that grew in response to the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s. Serial killers were a boogeyman who could seemingly kill anyone at any time without warning, especially young and vulnerable white women. The serial killer acts neither out of passion nor premeditation, decried a sensationalist 1985 article in the Anniston Star. No one is completely safe. Slasher films are serial killer films, and thus, every slasher villain, no matter how basic or cliché, represents an era of great and partially fabricated fear. The iconic slasher is an urban invader, a threat to people of privilege who think they're safe in the suburbs. No one is completely safe, after all. Though his origins were less overt until the 2010 remake, Freddy Krueger adds to all this a layer of pedophilia threat. He doesn't just target young women, he targets children, high schoolers, and his sexual threat is clear in the imagery of his first film. He's not just a monster who kills you in your sleep, and he's not even just the embodiment of 1980s fear of predation. He's stranger danger given human form. He's the adult you can't trust your kids around. This is given a sickening twist in the second movie, wherein Freddy can be read as a metaphor for a gay awakening. How intentional this was on behalf of the filmmakers is apparently still up for debate, but the homoerotic imagery in the film, combined with the main character's body being physically taken over by this sexual predator icon, adds a complicated edge to the horror and vibe of the film, something absolutely dripping with closeted angst of the 80s. As a whole, slashers can also very easily represent the concept of punishment against sin and immorality. The most common tropes for classic slasher victims is that the drunk and the promiscuous somehow deserve to be killed by these faceless killers. Again, consider the rise in popularity of these films during the conservative backlash against the sexual revolution, and you can begin to see these movies as cautionary tales for teens, warning them about the risks of having a normal sex drive. In particular, the killing force of Jason in Friday the 13th was spawned from the hedonism of camp counselors, which led to the death of a child. Thus, Jason himself becomes a symbol of almost divine retribution in the eyes of some conservative viewers and filmmakers. As one of human culture's most ancient, prolific, and polymorphic horror icons, the meaning and cultural value of vampires has changed many times across history. The symbolic layers of Dracula in particular are already richly layered in his original novel by Bram Stoker. In some ways, Dracula can represent, and I'm sorry if this particular point is getting repetitive, a sexual threat and an expression of repressed homosexual desire, at least in relation to the novel's main hero, Jonathan Harker. Dracula, and many vampires in general, don't often hunt and attack their prey. They seduce them, lure them in with their words and supernatural charisma. But of course, to give in to this seduction is to be infected by a vampiric curse, easily read as a metaphoric, sexually transmitted infection in this context. This also gives vampires the general tone of disease anxiety. They're coming to get me for gay crimes. This also gives vampires the general tone of disease anxiety, which was especially prevalent at the time of the novel's release. The way in which Dracula's arrival to England is accompanied by a massive storm, and the arrival of wolves in the novel also pairs this work with invasion literature, a genre of fiction born out of World War I concerned with foreign influence and invasion. Dracula, being an Eastern European who some say embodies a lot of Jewish stereotypes at the time, does essentially invade England, bringing with him disease and moral degeneracy. In just this one novel, Dracula is disease, moral corruption, foreign influence, and other coded themes. Every movie adaptation of him and his kin is a new opportunity for contemporary twists on what vampires as a species can represent. I think everyone who cares about Godzilla knows that his original film is a metaphor for the atomic bombs dropped on Japan, right? Everyone knows that by now, surely? The radiation inherent to the character, the flash of light destruction of Japanese cities, all of it makes him the most famous and obvious metaphorical monster in cinema history. That is part of why the first Godzilla film hit so hard and became popular enough to become the world's longest running film franchise, as recognized by Guinness. This theme is modernized in the 2016 reboot Shin Godzilla, in which our boy is made out to represent Japan's 2011 nuclear meltdown, complete with talk of radioactive fallout and a critique of the bureaucratic red tape impeding the speed of disaster response. What's most fun to me about Godzilla, besides his obvious S-tier status as a monster husband, is his slow transformation over time. In his first film, he is an absolute nightmare, a terror to Japan as a country and culture, and unquestionably a villain. But, as the film series progresses, he starts to defend Japan against other monsters, and begins to be revered as a friend and ally. In 2015, the Shinjuku Ward of Tokyo, which has had the privilege of being destroyed by Godzilla in 3 different movies, appointed Godzilla as their tourism ambassador. Mayor Kenichi Yoshizuma even called Godzilla the pride of Japan. In this way, it could be said that Godzilla evolved from metaphoric trauma into a coping mechanism, a way for Japanese culture to strengthen itself after such a scar. Okay, back to space we go. A lot of alien invasion stories, unsurprisingly, are contemporary versions of invasion literature. The idea that another nation, another planet even, with a culture vastly different than yours, may invade and overpower your country, is a common historical anxiety, and the story of an alien invasion is an easy vehicle for this type of narrative. War of the Worlds, an 1898 novel that basically introduced the world to the concept of an extraterrestrial invasion, played upon the fears of a then vast British Empire, that even they could be toppled by another nation if their technology was superior. This is emphasized further by the Martians bringing with them an invasive plant species that quickly overruns native flora, like a monstrous version of the kudzu vine. Steven Spielberg's 2005 rendition of the story modernizes the horror of invasion to include the anxieties of a post-9/11 America, letting the audience be witness to the dusty collapse of American buildings. In doing this, he transformed the threat of alien invasion into one that played upon the modern fears of terrorist attacks. Most alien invasion films can be read this way, except probably Mars Attacks. The jury's still out. There are a lot of ways to read into robots in movies, but for my last section here, I want to talk about The Terminator specifically. On the surface, the original movie almost feels like an evolution of the slasher genre. A mostly mute, unstoppable, masculine villain spends the film killing women until it's finally stopped by a singular final girl. Some parts of the movie even play on the theme of a woman's vulnerability in public and the male gaze in general. However, I don't think this is the most interesting way to dissect this iconic slab of reinforced beef. The fact that the T-101 is explicitly and unquestionably a machine leads to a different set of thematic ideas, and the main driving evil of the first film can be more seen to be technology itself. Characters are repeatedly impeded or betrayed by technology. Ginger is killed by the Terminator, in part, because she couldn't hear the threat of him over the sound of her headphones. The police psychologist is interrupted by his beeper during interrogations, and then again as he passes the Terminator by, meaning he too entirely missed the real threat of the situation, thanks to invasive technology. Phones and locks fail to help any of our heroes or stop the threat, and the machine even uses phones as a tool to find and deceive its prey. Anti-technology anxiety is present here in the literal alienation of flesh itself when we see the T-101 peel back its own skin and reveal its true inhuman nature. The Terminator is not just a killer robot, it is the idea of technology betraying us, alienating us, and even impersonating us, which is a fear that may become more and more relevant over time with the advent of advanced quote-unquote AI. In fact, the 2019 remake of Child's Play can be seen playing with these fears, along with the apprehension about how easily the Internet of Everything can turn on us. Technology perverting and betraying the human form is also a theme in the lesser-known but brilliant Tetsuo, the Iron Man. In this 1989 Japanese film, a man's body is slowly distorted and transformed by metal, and in a way, this transformation reveals the inner monstrous nature of the man that had been hidden inside. There are actually a lot of interesting parallels between Tetsuo and the Terminator, but I think I'll save those for a future video. I really could go on and on. The main staples of zombies and werewolves are all easy vessels for messages about the world, and there are many, many examples of ghosts, demons, and other spectral threats that are stand-ins for deep psychological fears. The lesson here is twofold. First, if you are finding that a movie's monster is really sticking with you, or wonder why one has survived as an icon, maybe think about what it might represent. What is it saying about the era that spawned it? What fears did the creators imbue into it? Secondly, if you're an artist or writer, consider what you can add to your monsters. Often, it is not enough to just chase a girl down a hallway with a knife. What imagery and symbolism can you use to subconsciously remind the viewer of broader terrors? What anxieties can you play with to not only strike a chord with the viewer, but with the society they live in? Unlock that secret, and the claws of your creature can sink that much deeper into the minds of your audience. A good monster can scare you for a night, but a good symbol can entrance you for a lifetime. Happy Halloween, everyone. Be safe out there. Mayor Kenichi Yoshizuma. Mayor Kenichi Yoshizuma